Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. Sitting in my hotel here in, I think it's Santa Ana, California, is where I'm at. Race back here. I'm done. Ken Wiebe is done with his writing as we get set to launch the first official regular season Kenny and Renny of basically what's season 2 of Kenny and Renny. And, I'll talk about this with Ken when I get on, but I'm not sure I fully thought this through this year. Now that I'm on the broadcast, if you watch the game tonight, you probably saw me on the broadcast. I'm out on the road. One of the fun times about the road afterwards is going out, having a couple drinks, eating some food afterwards. I haven't eaten. Kelly, Rudy, and Rick Ball are down in the hotel lobby having a good time. And hey, if you watch Kenny and Renny, and I know a lot of you do, Kelly Rudy was the star of our most watched long form Kenny and Renny show because he's a really interesting guy. And I could be down there spending time doing that. Instead, I'm going to spend time with you because it's Kenny and Renny, and it's what Kenny and Renny do. But it's not Kenny and Renny until Ken shows up, and we're going to need him to do that. So if you want him to show up, you got to play his music. Here's his music. Ken, my friend, we've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Back at it, our official post-game shows, finally on our favorite shows, because that's where I think the fans kind of take the most charge of the shows, as they're doing already. A lot of these people just getting in. Hello, Kenny and Renny, says Phyllis. It's great to see you. Phyllis is always there. She's tried and true. She's there no matter what. Tracy O'Kranick looks like she's going to bail on us because it's it's only 10:50 here. What is 12:50. It's almost 1 o'clock. I'm thinking of the old days. I was just telling Kelly on the way back here when I told him I was coming up to the room to do this show that we were on at some points at like 3 a.m. last year. This is the whole point. We're trying to be in. That's what preseason is for, so we can be in mid-season form now. We got to stay up till 3 in the morning for these kind of shows. But anyways, Ken, it's great to see you. How are you doing? How did your writing go? What did you think of the game?
Yeah, super interesting, Sean. Great to be with you, and great to have some folks in the chat, even though we're closing in on 1 a.m. Central Time. Certainly interesting tilt for sure. I don't think the Jets will be super happy. I mean, obviously they definitely had some opportunities, I guess, offensively, but it's interesting. The Jets in some ways got hellebucked, right? So that was sort of the theme of my column, the sort of turning of the tables here. A lot of nights the Jets the last couple of years relied on their goaltender to steal a couple of points, and I think you could make the argument that John Gibson was the guy doing that here this evening. And obviously a delicious storyline for anyone with an interest on the Olympics. Although Connor Hellebuck said he hadn't been thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that the Team USA management team was pretty fired up to see these two guys go head-to-head, and obviously John Gibson was the showstopper in this game for the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, I don't know that I totally buy into the idea that they got hellebucked. I think clearly early on the Jets poured it on. 7 shots in that first power play. I thought the power play looked pretty good. They were moving the puck well, but I think they were, getting a lot of volume on net. I didn't think necessarily there was too many crazy high danger chances there. Now there's a Morrissey play that, talking with Kelly Rudy after the game, he thinks was really the turning point of that game, or kind of where the Jets never got back into the game. It's that save that Gibson makes on Josh Morrissey where Kyle Connor just scored. It would have made it a 2-2 game. Jets never really recovered after that, and that was kind of the thing that I thought was strange, because if there's something that has marked this Jets team over the last couple of years, it's been a number of years, 3 straight years, that it's been their ability to kind of play their way back into games and kind of show
Yep.
that resolve. And that was the one thing that I thought really was missing tonight from them. That was a Winnipeg Jets team I didn't recognize in the way that they seemed to at some point kind of just fall in and welcome the their fate as it ended up being that night. If you think about, like even last year in the playoffs against the Edmonton Oilers, it's that miracle comeback that they have that kind of really sets the tone, and something that we're not surprised about because the Jets have always been able to do that. It just really seems to be missing tonight, don't you think, Ken?
I don't know. I mean, I'm with you to a degree, but I don't think that the Jets necessarily faded or fizzled. But I think it definitely the lack of ability to score on the power play certainly maybe was a bit of a letdown. I think maybe when it comes to generating offense, but I think that Gibson had to make more saves than maybe it appeared in the building. Sean, I mean, he made a couple of great saves on Nikolai Ehlers and obviously 3 high danger chances alone on Josh Morrissey. So. I mean, the shots at one point where I think were 15-6. So, I mean, for me, they had without Gibson standing tall early. I mean, you go up against a young team and score 1 or 2 out of the gate. That the other team has more reason to kind of fade into oblivion. But hey, the Ducks withstood those early pushes, and they did a good job of. Getting on the board first with that strange one from Shattenkirk. Yeah, there was a little bit of traffic and disruption happening in front of the net, but I mean that's a puck that's got to be stopped, right? I mean, this kind of to me, Sean. I mean, let's dig into it maybe right out of the gate. I mean, the Jets spent a lot of time talking about making life easier on Connor Hellebuyck in terms of shot quality and shot volume, and to a degree, they were successful on those fronts, right? Only 22 shots allowed, and I think Paul Maurice's stat was 12 even-strength shots. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck has been a guy who has flourished. Again, no team wants to give up 51 shots a night, but Hellebuyck is a guy that flourishes or seems to flourish with a heavier workload, and Paul Maurice actually kind of took umbrage when Mike McIntyre asked him about that after the game, saying he'll adjust fine. But I mean, is this something that we're going to have to monitor throughout the course of the year with the Jets? I mean, if the volume is down, I mean, we know that Connor Hellebuyck can lock in on lower shot games, but I think for me, this is going to be something that is going to be worth watching to see how what big a difference there might be for Hellebuyck if he isn't able to get into an early rhythm by having shots on net.
Yeah, I mean, usually when Paul Maurice takes umbrage with something, it's either, just a ridiculously out there comment or maybe you're touching on a nerve. You and I talked about this. It's actually something that I wanted to talk about in our last show. I don't know that we really got into it, but I mean, the idea of Connor Hellebuyck being a guy who's comfortable with discomfort. What we've seen from him, and it seems like we've seen him play his best hockey behind a Winnipeg Jets team that looked a little bit leaky, that didn't have great 5-on-5 numbers, that allowed a lot of high danger chances in close. And I don't know, I thought his performance may have looked a little sleepy tonight. I know, when the broadcast is going on, there's tons of people talking in your ear, and I know that someone in the broadcast had said at one point that they thought that Hellebuyck hadn't really worked hard enough to fight through the screen on that first goal. So I mean, take those opinions for what they are. But I do think that it's going to be interesting to see. And I think it was Paul Maurice who used the example of Mike Richter back in the day in the 90s with the New York Rangers, and being a goaltender. If you took a look at his stat line in games where they faced high volumes of shots, he was absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, we knew this. I don't know what year was this, Ken, remind me. I think it was the 2018-2019 season, maybe, that the Jets record when allowing over 40 shots was insane, right? It was just crazy how many of those games they would win where they were just allowing shot after shot after shot. A lot of those are Connor Hellebuyck wins, and a lot of those are wins where Connor Hellebuyck looked really, really good. He's a guy who likes high volume, and he's going to have to adjust to being a goaltender that isn't likely to see as much high volume this year. Now, they were playing the Anaheim Ducks, so maybe we shouldn't be, hanging up the mission accomplished banner saying the Jets are now a team that doesn't allow as many shots. There were things about that team that impressed me tonight. Their fight, the little bit of use of skill, the way that they stuck with it. I thought that the Anaheim youth really showed well for themselves on this night. But at the same time, I mean, you can see signs of why this team, this Anaheim Ducks team, is a team that's on the rebuild. But I guess I'm just trying to get back to the fact that
two redirections too, right? I mean, two redirections. We're not saying Hellebuyck was the reason the Jets lost by any stretch, Gary. We're just saying that, I mean, it's something that's going to be different, so there will be an adjustment. I mean, no one is saying that Hellebuyck can't adjust to a lower volume, but how long will it take and what will it look like? I think that's basically what we're getting at so far here.
Yeah. Let's get right into Cole Perfetti, because I was watching a little bit of our brothers at Illegal Curve and saw that was lighting it up. Give me your take on Cole Perfetti's first game in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy that we've talked a lot about throughout the course of preseason, and we weren't sure if he was going to get into the opening night lineup or not. We knew there was opportunity for him, and I think that Cole Perfetti's intelligence was on display once again. I think there were a couple of subtle little plays that they won't show up on the stats sheet, but there was one incredibly smart play in the offensive zone. The Jets had a cycle going. He made a very smart drop pass to Josh Morrissey. He made sure it wasn't going to lead to a turnover going the other way. I really liked what I saw from him in the game overall. He's a guy that created a nice scoring chance. I believe it was early in that second period. Really smart. I mean, I want another look at him. I mean, I know that Paul Maurice did mention on the CJOB pregame show interview with Paul Edmonds that he mentioned he would like to see him, with Adam Lowry and potentially Paul Stastny at some point during this road trip. I think he did enough to earn another look. Obviously, after the game, Paul Maurice was asked about him again by Murat Atesh, and Paul sort of went back to the well and saying, everyone knows he's a good hockey player. He's a smart hockey player. It's going to be all about what's best for him, whether that's 20 minutes in the minors with the Manitoba Moose or, playing a third line role right now with the Winnipeg Jets. So we'll sort of see how it goes. This week was very interesting. I mean, earlier in the week, Paul Maurice was kind of pouring water on the suggestion Perfetti could be in the lineup. And then the next day he was giving him the good news. So we know that the Jets are always want to be tempering the expectations when it comes to young players like Cole Perfetti, and for good reason, because it's not the end of the world if he has to spend some time in the American Hockey League. It doesn't mean that he's not ready. It just means that maybe he's not ready quite at this instant. I really liked what I've seen from him so far. He seems to be getting better as the games move on, and a lot of that has to do with his intelligence and his ability to process the game. I like what he's been able to do defensively. He's a guy who's a natural center, but he does a nice job along the wall. But let's see how it goes. I mean, hey, he got when Pierre-Luc Dubois was in the box after that strange headlock from John Gibson, when Dubois did everything to get out of the way and not cause a major collision. Perfetti got a chance on the power play. Sean, look at the replay, man. He was going in to disrupt him, but if he wanted to hit him, he could have. He did everything to get out of the way. He jumped into the boards instead of making contact.
So I think I see that as being kind of like the you watch Top Gun, right? We're both kids who grew up in the 80s. I see that as being like the air tower flyby, right? Like He went in,
of course
really,
he did,
really fast, hot and heavy, and threw himself in one of those situations where if you're a goalie, like I truly think for a second there that John Gibson thought he was about to get smoked, and it's one of those things where it's kind of like you're faking a guy out a little bit, right? So yeah. I entirely understand Gibson's response to that. I didn't think that was he.
Well, I didn't mind the response, but he could, if he wanted to hit him, he would have. I mean, so
no, I agree, but I think he also wanted to kind of get in his head, like that's kind of like similar to whizzing a puck by a goaltender's head.
Absolutely.
What happened there? I think that. And I mean, I'm okay with it either way. This is one of those situations where that's what I think Pierre-Luc Dubois should be doing. You got to get into a goalie's head, especially in a game like that when a goalie's playing like that. But at the same time, I can entirely see why John Gibson took umbrage with that. And I mean, if I'm on the ice playing in that game and a guy does that to my goaltender, I'm probably walking up and giving him a pop in the mouth at the same time, right? You don't want your goaltender having to think that he's that close to being smushed by, a guy the size of Pierre-Luc Dubois. So I entirely understand that.
Me too. I'm just saying, like, this is part of the thing that always kind of not bothers me, but it kind of annoys me that goalies are sort of like quarterbacks. They feel like they should never be hit. You're outside the blue paint. I'm not saying you should be running them, but I'm saying that you should be, not fair game, but you need to be careful. If you're going to be casually laissez-faire behind the net, I had no problem with the guy scaring you a little bit, giving you a little bit of a scare there. And I also don't mind the response from Gibson. In fact, I actually quite like it. I quite like the fact that he went after it. But it's one of those situations where goalies are a little bit too comfortable for me that I wouldn't mind if they were kind of, the ability to give them a little bit of a bump behind the net once in a while if they're wandering outside the blue paint.
Goalies feel like they're untouchable.
Exactly.
Their teammates treat them like they're untouchable, right? Like this is the whole deal. You want your goaltender to feel as though he's untouchable, and so the team works very hard to create that bubble or that atmosphere or that illusion of being untouchable around them. So, I mean, they come by it honestly. I don't have any problem with the goaltender feeling that way and like feeling like you're right. They're kind of like quarterbacks. And you want them to feel that way. You want your quarterback to be in the pocket and feel like he's invincible. That's exactly what you want from your goaltender. I love that. I'm gonna just
hang on one quick one. What do you think of Perfetti? I mean, obviously, I know that we disagreed. We disagreed on you didn't like him on the third line, and whereas I thought because of his ability to process, I actually quite like him in that spot, at least for the time being. I know most people would like to maybe see him in the top six, but I like easing him in on that line, but at some point I would like to see him maybe on that second power play unit.
Okay, well, I was going to ask you if you're okay with him because the whole balance between Cole Perfetti staying and going is how much ice time is he going to get? How are you going to best develop him? I don't think on that line is the right place to develop him. So either, I'd be more okay with moving him up into the top six and moving Andrew Kopp down and having Stastny and Kopp figure out a way to make a third line with Lowry. I mean, that is something that I would be okay with. I don't know. I'm reading the reactions on Twitter. I see some people are talking as though like he was the star of the game. I get it, and I think that people fall in love with players, and in a lot of cases they see what they want to see. I mean, I thought he handled his own tonight. I don't think that and does he deserve another look? I think sure. You'd give him another look, but if his look looks like that, and maybe we should assume that it's not going to, that he's going to get gradually better. But if his look looks like that, I don't think that's what you want necessarily out of him. He didn't do anything to jump off the page for me tonight. That's for sure. Mason McTavish looked like the true star of the guys making their first appearance in the NHL tonight. I even think that Bo Grew, in my mind, stood out more. He's the other player who made his NHL debut tonight. I thought that he stood out more than Cole Perfetti did. I didn't think Cole Perfetti played bad. I thought you saw flashes of his intelligence in there. What I wasn't overly what I didn't overly like about it was, I mean, I didn't like the way his line mates played around him. And a lot of time that's, we've heard so much about chemistry in this camp. I think it's kind of strange. I almost would have rather seen, got a look at Svechnikov in that spot so that we could see this apparent chemistry that had been building between Svechnikov and Harkins, right? Because one thing that stood out to me tonight, and maybe it kind of looked like it was heading that way towards the end of the preseason, but in the preseason, Svechnikov and Harkins looked like two of the Jets' best players. They looked really, really good, and we kept hearing over and over again how we dictate what this team is going to look like is based on the chemistry that they're showing with each other. Well, I thought those were two players, Harkins and Svechnikov, who showed a lot of chemistry, and then now we're not seeing them together. And so I'm wondering if Harkins, who I thought, looked okay tonight, but didn't wow me. I thought that he was fairly on par with what we saw from Cole Perfetti, and so I find it kind of strange that people are talking like this was the second coming of whoever with Cole Perfetti. And then on the other hand, I think people would probably look at Jansen Harkins and not be overly impressed by his game, where I think they had a fairly similar game between the two of them. I'm wondering if Harkins is like that now because he's got new line mates. I'm wondering what he would have looked like with Svechnikov. And these are kind of the questions that get answered by moving Perfetti out of the lineup, right? So to me, I look at it as a long-term thing, and I still think it's this. Cole Perfetti is not a guy that you want playing on your third line alongside Adam Lowry, because I don't necessarily think, one, Adam Lowry is the kind of player you want a skilled player like that playing with, and two, because at some point you're going to want Adam Lowry out there grinding. I don't know that Cole Perfetti fits there. So I'm a big believer that Cole Perfetti needs to, if you want to keep Cole Perfetti on this team, and I'm not against that, if you want to keep on this team, you need to find a way to get him into the top six where he's around skilled players. I mean, I did think, and we can get into PLD and the second line, but I thought Nick Ehlers really stood out tonight. I thought he was phenomenal. He was fast. He looked all over the place. It looked to me like a night where his line mates didn't keep up with him. I would have been far more interested in seeing what Perfetti looked like on a line with Nick Ehlers tonight than where they had him. So the whole idea of me wanting to, it's not that I don't want to see more Perfetti. I'm just not sold like you are in having him on that third line. I don't like the way that line looks. I've been on the record, and I'll go on it again, of thinking the Jets need kind of a grind element. Roscoe Picotrain was talking a lot about it in the chat so far, saying that he thinks that the Jets need to have more of an edge to them. I thought for the most part, tonight's game was a flyby until the Jets started kind of crashing the crease. And so I don't know. So long story short, I don't really like Perfetti in that spot. I think if you're going to keep him, you need to find a way to keep him in the top six. And other than that, he's probably going to be finding his way to the Manitoba Moose anyways, where he can play more time and develop more. And then you can start figuring out what you're going to do with the rest of the team. Because once again, I've been on the record saying this, I think the biggest issue for this Jets team is the bottom six. And I didn't think they showed well tonight.
Kyle, someone who did show well, Kyle Connor, not just the one-timer, which was a rocket, as we've been used to seeing. Actually, we know that Kyle Connor talked a lot in training camp about needing to elevate his defensive game, and I thought there were a couple of great examples of back pressure where Kyle did a great job of coming back and stealing the puck from an opponent. So that's a good start for him. I like the fact, even though it didn't result in a goal, I like the fact that the Jets flip-flopped Kyle Connor and Blake Wheeler to have the Connor be available for the one-timer on that side there. And, it didn't result in the goal on the power play, but I like that spot for him. And I'll be very fast. Sean, we've seen it now. It's a theme. It's not just a one-off. This is another night where the Jets struggled to score without Mark Scheifele. Yes, we know they had 34 shots on goal, and yes, their power play had looks, but this was another night where the Jets had trouble scoring without Mark Scheifele. Obviously, it's just a one-off in this situation. We know Mark Scheifele is highly fired up for the season. You had a chance to speak with him individually. We know that Mark is motivated to be on Team Canada, be on the Olympic team. I'm on record as saying I will not be surprised if this is the year that Mark Scheifele goes from kind of 82-point player to a 100-point player. I really do think that. I think he is poised for a big jump in terms of his, production. And yes, some folks can say whatever they want about empty net goals and whatever else. I mean, Mark Scheifele is going to be a two-way force, and he is going to have a solid year. But now it's time to see how that goes. And Kyle Connor is ready. And I mean, I'll be fascinated. We've talked about this a lot. Is Blake Wheeler going to be on that line full time? We'll see. I mean, a couple of tough penalties. The first one is very ticky-tack. After the Jets had 4 penalties in a row, you knew that the next one was coming their way. The other one was a neutral zone play. Great pass by Wheeler on the goal. He sold the shot and made a great pass. But, I think that the Jets will investigate Blake Wheeler and Paul Stastny together on a line at some point. The Jets want Mark Scheifele playing 20, 22 minutes. I mean, another guy they want to get in that range probably is Ehlers. Ehlers could be in that 20-plus minute range. So if that's the case, what if Blake Wheeler and Paul Stastny play together? But then you got to find the right line mates, and how is it going to work? And I mean, again, no one's putting Blake Wheeler out to pasture. I still think he's going to be a highly productive player. But this to me reminds me of Washington Capitals circa Stanley Cup season, where Alex Ovechkin took a 2-minute reduction or whatever in ice time to help keep him fresh for when the playoffs started. I think that's something that whole load management theme is something the Jets will look at some point with Blake Wheeler and Paul Stastny potentially, but I don't think it's going to be happening right out of the gate.
First off, I just want to show this comment. Renny stole Kenny's truth potion. He's finally spitting facts. I've been spitting facts this whole time. You just haven't been listening. You're finally coming around to my way of thinking. The idea, I thought Wheeler's game was an interesting one tonight because, I thought, what he brings to the table was on full display with that goal. You explained it well. He's so good at kind of selling things and getting everyone on the ice looking in a certain direction and then dishing that puck off and having a wide open net for Kyle Connor to pounce on. I've said this time and time again. Blake Wheeler, if you give him space, is still one of the best players in the NHL when he has space. I think it's harder and harder for him to find space as you get older. I mean, it's father time wins all battles, right? I think that Blake Wheeler's done a phenomenal job of holding off father time. You think about it in this game, and a guy like Ryan Getzlaf, he's a year older than Blake Wheeler, but the way that we've thought about Ryan Getzlaf compared to where he was in his prime, that's like, we're talking like 4 or 5 years ago. We're talking not long after the Ducks eliminated the Jets from the playoffs in 2015 in 4 straight games in the first round. We don't think of that with Blake Wheeler. I mean, Blake Wheeler's best seasons don't seem like they were that long ago. So I say this, there's a reason why he got so many points on the power play last season. It's because he's got time and space on the power play, and he's lethal when he's got time and space. 5-on-5, that's clearly a different question. The stats seem to back that up. I thought tonight, so he takes those 2 penalties, right? Did both of his penalties result in goals? I can't remember. No, I think only one did. But those to me are penalties of a guy who loses a puck battle due to speed or whatever, and then gets caught using his stick hauling a guy down. I think we see a lot of Blake Wheeler penalties, and a lot of Blake Wheeler penalties look just like that. And I thought that was really on display. What you're getting from Blake Wheeler is he ages into the role that he's playing right now. Is, at best, he's still that guy who's super dangerous when he's got room, but at other times he can get beat to the puck and takes those penalties like that. I don't think anyone was expecting it to cost them against the Anaheim Ducks. The story that we'd heard going into the game, just let me finish this up, was the Anaheim Ducks scored 3 power play goals at home in the entirety of last season. They had 2 power play goals here tonight. So I don't think anyone was expecting that to be the big difference in the game, but Wheeler kind of got caught with that. Lowry giving Wheeler time and space. So I get
what about Stastny, Lowry, and Wheeler?
Well, that's what I was thinking of potentially happening, either Kopp going down there or a guy like Wheeler going down there. I honestly don't know that's. I mean, I guess this is where I've got a problem with that idea is Blake Wheeler. Like I said, you give him time and space. If you can find a way to put him with creative players and guys that he can set up, he can do that. I don't know that Lowry can be the guy that he wants to set up there, and is Stastny that trigger man anymore? And is the idea of putting a 36-year-old and a 35-year-old on a line that is meant to grind a good idea? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because again, I think at some point you have to get Lowry, whether you address it at the trade deadline, you have to try and make the team harder to play against. And Lowry is the most direct way to do that. But if you put Wheeler and Stastny on that line and ask that of them, one, I don't think they can be that offensive with Lowry as their center. But if they're supposed to be the grind line, I don't think that line has, those players have much left by the time the playoffs come around. And I don't think they can play that role anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'll remember this. This is, again, preseason, but the Jets played one game against Calgary a couple of years ago where it was Lowry, Kopp, and Wheeler. And yes, they were playing against, a younger team and everything else, but they were dominant in that game. And it always it was something that I kind of stored for safekeeping, Sean. So it was one of those things where you wonder if that was a well that Paul Maurice might eventually go back to. We'll see. We know there are always going to be options that are, investigated. But to me, it would be interesting. And I think that I think Adam Lowry's hands are underrated. He may not be a Kyle Connor natural finisher, but this is a guy who scored 50 in the Western Hockey League. So he's got a nose for the net, and the ability to dig out pucks, which is why I like him with Perfetti. He's the kind of guy that can do the hard work and get the pucks into the hands of a skilled guy like Perfetti, and also a skilled guy like Stastny, who also has that similar vision. So that's why I'd like to see what that line looks like, whether it's against San Jose or against the Minnesota Wild. I'd like to see that stay together a little bit longer. But eventually too, I would just like to see Wheeler and Stastny. They played a little bit together last year. I know a lot of people are saying that Maurice is putting player above. Well, let's not forget, we're not that far removed from Blake Wheeler walking into Paul Maurice's office and say, hey, when Brian Little got hurt, I'm ready to play center. I'm going to sacrifice offense to play center. So people who think that Blake doesn't want to, put the team first, I don't buy that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how things progress over the course of the year. And hey, we'll see how it goes. This is game one. A lot of folks asking about Pierre-Luc Dubois. He had a scoring chance early. I thought he was engaged a little bit more physically. He didn't like a hit that was delivered to his line mate, cross check. He chased after the guy, so good on him for that. Gave Gibson a little scare. Was it his best game that he's ever played in the NHL? No, but we watched him, Sean. We watched the head-to-head between the first and second line during the preseason, during training camps, when the scrimmages were happening. The Dubois line did a very good job against the Scheifele line in almost every single scrimmage. So I'm not going to come out here and say, hey, well, Dubois didn't get 3 points in game one, so obviously it doesn't matter that he came into camp, refreshed. It's going to take a little bit longer. One of the notes I got from someone today on Twitter was telling me that they gave up after the first period and were turning to Netflix. And I'm like, you waited 5 months for a game. It's an 82 game season. Let's not forget that. And hey, love the passion. It's great to see people fired up. Let's just see how this goes. This is the first game in front of real full-ish building in a long time. Let's see how this road trip goes. But hey, Sean, these are the facts. The Jets look like they had a soft schedule coming out of the gate. They're currently 0-1. So that's a missed opportunity in a lot of regards. We know it. No one's losing Josh Morrissey said it well. You don't win the Stanley Cup in game one. You don't miss the playoffs in game one. There were a lot of things that the Jets will want to build on. Let's see how it goes. Let's give this a little bit of time to breathe, and then we can weigh in and see where things are at. But to me, I'm not concerned about Pierre-Luc Dubois after game one. He was flying in training camp. He took a cross-check in the face in the chicklets from Ridley Gregg in that game against Ottawa. That's something that can be frustrating to get over, right? That's something where I'm not saying he's playing a defensive game, because I don't see that at all, but let's see how this line progresses as we move along. We've seen plenty of things in practice to suggest that they can be a highly successful line, but the other part of what I was mentioning about wanting to see Wheeler and Stastny together, I have a little bit of intrigue about maybe seeing what Nikolai Ehlers can do with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor. They had a stretch of games last year where it worked really well, right? But I'm not saying go use it for 80 games, but I want to see it again. I want to see it with Mark Scheifele, dedicated to this two-way game. And based on what I saw from Kyle Connor today, hey, I don't think you have to be as concerned about maybe there not being enough defense on that line in order for it to potentially work at some point. So Let's shift over to the defense, Sean. Obviously, we
Just
spent a lot of
hold on.
Okay.
Just a couple of things. One, I just wanted to point this comment out. It's been up here for a while, but from Rob
Sure.
Somerville, a good energy line would be Harkins, Lowry, Kopp. I don't know why I didn't think about this, but this seems obvious to me once he said this. I mean, if the Jets want to accomplish what I think they need to accomplish and have that kind of grinded line, this is something where I think Harkins, could kind of bring a similar energy and potential scoring ability that we saw from Mason Appleton. I don't think he's quite as frenetic a player, but I think that he could kind of fit that role. Second, I got to bring this up here. I was going to say no to Kevin Himana here about the headband, but I realized I do have a headband here. So let's take care of this business. It's going to be the first time we haven't done this in a while. And I love hearing the music from our main man, Tristan. So let's get this on here. Time for Sean's headband.
Tremendous.
Kenny, I even picked up a new headband for this year because I thought it's
commitment, buddy. It's commitment.
It's time to up the game. So let's get out of here.
Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. One quick one.
Yeah.
I think the last time I was in Anaheim, that was one of the best travel adventures and audibles called on the fly by me. I believe in that November 2019. I believe that's when I saw the Guns N' Roses concert in Staples Center, where I switched my flights around at the last minute. It was an afternoon game, and instead of hustling over to San Jose immediately, I went back to the Staples Center and watched Slash and Axl and company rock out at the Staples Center, which was one of the fantastic shows because I'd missed them as they rolled through town in Winnipeg for the outdoor show because I was in New York that year. So it was great to be able to see them in what was a home game for them, outside of the Los Angeles Forum, where they also played a show on that tour. It was just a fantastic show, and the people in front of me had flown in from the UK to see the show, and they were in full Slash and Axl gear. So it was quite a scene that day at the Staples Center. So, anyways, good. It reminded me of how much I wish I had been with you in California for this opening road trip. But hopefully, we get to that point at some stage of this season.
I think we will. But Ken, I kind of feel as though you are speaking to something else when you talk about this situation, because I know you were pushing me to do something when I was down here, and I didn't do it, and I feel guilty now. I'll let everyone in on it.
That was not what I was getting at, but I do
it's
think
almost
that
the exact same situation you're talking about. You're like, I called the last minute audible, and I did this, and for the rest of my life, I'm going to appreciate that I did that. Ken and I both like our metal, and I'm a big System of a Down fan. So to your story, I remember when I first started going to university for journalism in Ryerson, it was 2004. And System of a Down was in Toronto on September 4th, and I was going to Toronto on September 5th. And so I was in Winnipeg when they were in Toronto. I hopped in a plane and I flew to Toronto, and then they flew to Winnipeg and played on September 7th. And so I missed them, and I was like, I'll catch them next time. They split up, and they haven't really been a band since until now. And they're playing in Oakland 2 nights after the game in San Jose, which I'm going to be there covering. And Ken has been telling me to get my act together and make sure I go watch that concert.
I've seen them. They're tremendous.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. So, and as of right now, unless I make some last minute moves, I'm not going to see that concert. So,
still not too late. Still not too late.
Yeah, look at you. You're just trying to get me to go and live.
Hey, I'm going to tell you right now. I not that he didn't much encouragement, but Mike McIntyre was at Dodger Stadium for Game 3 to watch Max Scherzer in that 1-0 pitchers duel. That made me feel pride. Like that was a Ken Wiebe move right there, a power move, getting to the game, and he loved it. So definitely a good thing. Adam, I am not in California. I am in my living room here, so there will be no California golf for me, unfortunately, on this trip. I was fortunate enough to play Lake Merced last time I was in the San Francisco area, and it was absolutely dynamite, but no California golf for me this season.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone's getting into this now, and I'm thinking, like, why am I not going to this concert? And to your point about McIntyre going to that game, so Game 5, winner take all. So tomorrow is going to be a beach
well, there you
day,
go.
we're off. But I could have hopped on a plane, and probably still could hop on a plane and get there. I tried, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. I tried to leverage Sportsnet's relationship with the Major League Baseball to see if I couldn't get in on a press pass to go watch that game. Also, Ken, who has seen every ball game in every single Major League Baseball stadium, I'm trying to do what he's doing. I'm only halfway there, and I've never seen a game before in San Francisco.
It's incredible.
Anyways,
Oracle's
everyone
incredible.
should know that the people at Sportsnet have far too much honor and integrity to indulge me in just a jerk move that I was trying to pull off there. So congratulations to the people at Sportsnet. You're breaking my heart, but I'm not going to be making it to Game 5 either. I had all these grand designs on this trip, being like all this stuff, and well, I'll head to the beach tomorrow.
Blake Wheeler said it's not a vacation. We're here for business, Sean. Remember.
All right. Sounds good. Let's get into Pierre-Luc Dubois, because people were asking about him. What did you see from Pierre-Luc Dubois?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned it before the break. I mean, I thought he was fine. I don't think it was his best game, but I also don't think it was his worst. I think they're still working on the chemistry factor. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, Nikolai Ehlers was flying in the game today, I thought, for sure. And, I know it resulted in a penalty, but I like the net drive by Andrew Kopp. That didn't bother me one bit. Of course, people are going to react the way they reacted, but it's sort of like the pitcher. I mean, if you see a guy hanging over the plate, once in a while, you're going to have to buzz him inside. So, I mean, the Jets weren't getting enough traffic. I have no problem with that. I mean, he was still trying to score. It's not like it was a blatant attack. Obviously, he wasn't trying to get out of the way, but nothing wrong with going to the net hard. No, Dubois didn't have too much sun, guys. Come on. Work in progress, but let's see how this goes. I mean, let's not freak out over what happens in Game 1. I mean, we know that he was very open on 32 Thoughts with Elliot and Jeff, saying that last year was tough for him, dating back because of COVID. Gyms weren't open in Montreal, and things got kind of behind the 8 ball in Columbus, and then obviously he played basically 2 games in a month after the quarantine and the injuries. So I think that Dubois is ready to have a good year, and it's up to him to show it. So we'll see how it goes as time moves on here.
Here's my concern with the whole Pierre-Luc Dubois thing, and I think tonight's game just kind of reinforced that for me. Is, I get the whole thing about him feeling better and going out and getting in shape in the off season. My concern is what I didn't feel like I saw a lot of flashes of last year, and I don't know that this can be blamed on someone not being in good enough shape. Is like, if you think about it, I know you and I feel this way about Pierre-Luc Dubois and Wheeler, and that we saw chemistry between those two players.
Sure.
I think so. I mean, we're talking about places, if we're going to go in different directions, if you were going to move Nick Ehlers up to that top line alongside Connor and Scheifele, where you would put Wheeler. I think any of those conversations should start with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Blake Wheeler playing together, because I feel like I saw chemistry between those two players, and I feel like that would be a good place to start. But how many players do you feel like you saw true chemistry with that Pierre-Luc Dubois had with other players on that team last season? Because that's the thing that concerns me is I don't know necessarily that it was a win thing, that it was him being in shape, that it was him getting his legs underneath him. It's the flashes of chemistry that you would see here and there, or that you see here and there between players, like we're seeing from a kid like Cole Perfetti right now, that really give you hope. And I'm wondering your opinion. I'm not trying to say it doesn't exist. I'm wondering your opinion on who you thought Pierre-Luc Dubois showed chemistry with last season.
Yeah, I think it was almost impossible for him to have chemistry because of the revolving door element of line mates. And I totally understand that Paul Maurice was trying to find some chemistry somewhere. We know he had we had chemistry with the bread man Artemi Panarin, but again, these guys don't grow on trees and they're hard to find. Which so is why I think that Paul Maurice thinks that Ehlers and Dubois can have that kind of chemistry, because when you have him with a dynamic player, he can be that powerful force. But I think part of the problem is that Pierre-Luc Dubois got built up so much that people expect that hat trick against the Toronto Maple Leafs every night. Like, this is a guy, he hasn't scored 30 goals. So I think he has the ability to score 30 goals, but for people to think that he was going to score 45 or 44 like Laine did, I think that's part of not having the proper expectations for the player. That's not to say that he can't grow into that kind of player, but right now he's a two-way player. He's not a pure sniper like Patrick Laine, and he probably never will be, but he can do what he does at a high level, and I expect him to be that 1B center. If the Jets are going to go far, Pierre-Luc Dubois will have to do well. Like, the Jets aren't going to go far unless Dubois grows into that 1B or 2A role, whatever you want to call it. He had chemistry with Wheeler. Let's not forget, he had 2 overtime winners. So I think right at that time he was playing with Wheeler and Scheifele, I think, in those games. But yeah, this is another thing. So if folks are worried about the defensive element, put Andrew Kopp with Mark Scheifele and Nikolai Ehlers. There you have a little bit of a safety net. Then you can play Kyle Connor with Dubois and Blake Wheeler, right? Or you can use Stastny on that line too. I mean, there's all kinds of options to look at. Let's see how it goes. But, I mean, is there a natural fit right now in terms of someone who has built-in chemistry? No. I mean, the only guy who has built-in chemistry with Pierre-Luc Dubois is Evgeny Svechnikov, who was his line mate in junior when they lit it up. But that's a long time ago now. That's 5 seasons ago, basically. So to think that all naturally, if you put them together, they would all of a sudden, get into the hot tub time machine and think that they're back in Cape Breton, do I think it's worth checking out at some point? Sure, but I wouldn't say that that's why the player was signed in the off season, or signed officially today, but looked at in the off season. So this is one thing that I also want to reiterate. And yes, I understand folks think that I'm continually making excuses for Pierre-Luc Dubois. These are the facts. He had 3 solid NHL seasons and 1 bad one in the middle of COVID. So let's see which is the accurate depiction of which player he is. I'm betting on it being the first 3 seasons in the NHL, and I think he can be better than he was in the first 3 seasons because he's just growing into his prime. But ultimately, it's up to the player to get that done, and we'll see what that looks like.
I'll say this, talking with Dallas Aikens today, and he had said that his veterans on this Anaheim Ducks team really, really struggled with COVID. And he'd said, I think there's a lot of discounting out there, or maybe not a lot of talk about how different players were affected by this. So I think, Pierre-Luc Dubois may have been one of these players that was really affected by that. And I'm willing to explore that, and I'm willing to explore the idea of what you talked about, the great seasons that he had previously on a different team. I will say that, and I don't know, maybe this isn't even a valid point, but the way things ended up in Columbus show frustration from a coach who had, said to our own Christine Simpson on Sportsnet that what was happening with Pierre-Luc Dubois was a process that, he was working on time and time and time again. So, maybe you got to give credit to something that John Tortorella was seeing back then, and that's something that is popping up here in his time in Winnipeg. But I go back to the idea of where's the chemistry? Who does Pierre-Luc Dubois fit with on this team? Because I'll just say this, and it's only 1 game, and I'm not going to get too excited about 1 game. But if you want to look at it as only being 1 game, it's 1 game that looked a lot like what all the games that he played in last year looked like. I just don't know that Nick Ehlers is a fit with him. Nick Ehlers, to me, looked to be a guy skating with 2 guys on his line chasing him tonight for the most part. That's what I saw from that line. I don't think he's getting the proper support there. And so that's my issue when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois as it stands with this team. Is we've been told, he doesn't want to talk about last year. Clearly, it bugs him. Clearly, they don't want him dwelling on that. He wants to move on. At some point, if he wants to move on and wants people to stop talking about it, he's going to have to start putting up results so that we've got something else to talk about. And again, it's only one game, but this game, if it plays out over and over and over again, is not going to be the game that is going to silence the fans and the media talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois' place on this team.
Yeah, I thought his engagement was higher than at some of the games last year, for sure. I mean, I'm not grasping at straws here, but the fact that, he was getting a little bit more involved. It saw him win a few puck battles. He had a good scoring chance. What I would say is I don't see it being a great fit for him kind of on his offside in the high slot right now. I know that there were a couple chances during the camp where he was able to get to rebounds and have some retrievals, but he's kind of on. This is so interesting. I mean, and we both have kind of wondered about this, about Scheifele potentially moving back into the high slot position if Wheeler is on the wall because of how dangerous he was there. But we also saw Scheifele has worked so hard on his one-timer that, don't want to get the masses all fired up, but there were some Line A-like moments when it comes to how he's been hitting his one-timers. So obviously the Jets want to have a look at that, but let's see how it progresses here as we move along. But let's go to the D. I think it's really important that, it's a topic we've talked so much about.
Just before we go there, I want to touch on that. Had an interesting conversation again with Dallas Aikens, who was really, really open with us tonight. Gave us some really interesting stuff on Paul Maurice, who he credits for
Smart
getting
guy
him into the industry. So Ryan Getzlaf, who's been a disher his entire career, very much think of Blake Wheeler, very similar players in that vein, has been asked to become the trigger man on their power play this year because Trevor Zegras is going to be the guy who they want handling the puck a la Wheeler in the bumper spot this season. So it was funny. Dallas Aikens went to Getzlaf and asked him, to go into to not be the passer and to start shooting. And Getzlaf's response was, I've made a lot of money passing the puck. I don't think it's a good idea, but at some point came around. And so that's what they're trying to do on that power play this year. But Dallas Aikens also talked quite a bit about the idea of kind of retraining your brain to be that kind of player who's going to do that. And it makes me think, now that you bring it up, of Scheifele going and doing that. Now, I like the idea. You said we've seen these kind of Mark Scheifele, these moments of Scheifele looking a little Line A-esque with that one-timer. And he's put in all that work. But I guess the question or the statement that I come back to is, he's done a lot of work, and I love the idea of them having a trigger man there. But has he at any point in the last season and so far this year in training camp, in preseason games, has he ever looked as dangerous in Line A's old spot as he looked in that spot in the slot that we're talking about? And it makes me wonder, why are we, if he's not so effective as a one-time shooter in that spot, or to the degree that a guy like Line A was, and I know that's a big ask, so let's say 80% or 70% of what Line A was able to accomplish in that spot. Why are they not, like you're suggesting, moving him back into that middle? Like, why not put Pierre-Luc Dubois in that spot and let him work on the one-timer? Because I guess the question is, or maybe the statement that I'm saying is, I'm seeing a lot more, or I saw a lot more out of Scheifele in that slot than I've seen out of anyone else in that spot, Stastny or Pierre-Luc Dubois included. So where would the biggest difference be made? Would Scheifele get that much more scoring done in the slot as opposed to Pierre-Luc Dubois, compared to if you move Pierre-Luc Dubois into the one-timer spot now? Would he get that much less than Scheifele is getting in that spot, is my question.
Well, the bigger issue is the Jets don't have another right-handed option, really, unless you're putting Neil Pionk on that side, right? In order for Scheifele to be effective in the slot, you need to have Wheeler on the half wall, right, to create the one-timer. But then who's the far guy, unless it's Ehlers?
Pierre-Luc Dubois, that's who I'm suggesting.
Well, no, but Dubois is left-handed, so it's not going to work for him on the right wing side. You need a right-handed shot on that spot.
Okay. Yeah.
Because Wheeler,
Yeah,
like if you, I mean, you could
that
conceivably have a lefty along the wall, but Wheeler is the distributor there, so Wheeler's not going to be in his offside and try to hit it to Scheifele in the slot, right? So, I didn't necessarily like always the way that it looked last year. I mean, Mark Scheifele did get more touches, and that's important for him, and that's why they prefer him in that spot. And now if he's going to have that one-timer element, I think it can be dangerous. But, obviously we know it's a matter of getting these guys comfortable together and seeing where it goes. But, again, I thought that the Jets' second unit did a nice job of getting pucks through. They had a couple nice one-timer chances. I think Nate Schmidt did a nice job getting shots through from the top. And there were plenty of options, plenty of looks. Let's see how it goes when Scheifele's back in the lineup, and then we'll see what the adjustments are going to be made or need to be made from there.
Did you notice the fourth line at all tonight, Ken?
I did notice Svechnikov a couple times. I noticed Riley Nash early. Obviously, he took that accidental kind of high stick from Hampus Lindholm there in the neutral zone. I did not notice Vesalainen a whole lot. No. I mean, they didn't get a lot of ice time. Obviously, chasing the game, and with Nash being the only guy kind of used on the penalty kill, and as Paul Maurice kind of mentioned earlier in the week, he was going to probably look at Paul Stastny on the penalty kill. It's a job that he's done in the past. They kind of wanted to minimize his minute or limit his minutes or the taxing nature of those penalty kill minutes, but he was out there today with Riley Nash on a couple of occasions. So no, I didn't know. I expected to see more from the fourth line, and there too. Like, once Scheifele's back in, what's the trickle down? Does it mean Harkins? Like you talked about Harkins and Svechnikov. Well, if Perfetti stays in the lineup and maybe Vesalainen comes out potentially, then you will have Svechnikov and Harkins back on that fourth line in between Riley Nash. And when it comes to the grinding element, Sean, the other way the Jets can go is to put Nash with Lowry. Then you have two guys that are checkers primarily, who kind of get your nose dirty and that sort of thing. And then you go a little bit more, but then you'd have to go probably Harkins or Perfetti in that other role if you're looking for more skill on that fourth line. So I think it'll be interesting to see. It was obviously a tough situation. With the way that the salary cap gymnastics that we've touched on, with Svechnikov not being able to be on the plane because he hadn't been signed yet, and they were waiting to get the paperwork done and everything else. And now you got to fly in on a game day. Yeah, sure, he got there in time, but it's just not optimal circumstances, right? If he had been there and having a normal routine, maybe you're feeling a little bit fresher than, again, he wasn't having 3 flights like you did to get there, Sean, but the difference between getting there on the day of the game a couple hours before, being there the night before, getting a good night's sleep and being ready, that's a factor as well. So I expect to see more of the Svechnikov that we saw in the preseason, where he earned a job by having, I think 5 games that he played. I thought he had 4 excellent games and one where he looked maybe a tad tired because he was playing 5 games in a row and he would kind of reach that taxing nature of training camp. So I think, he's a very good player. I think he's going to fit really well with the Jets, and I could see him earning a bigger role as the year goes on, whether that's on the third line right wing or as a really solid fourth liner. I'm expecting him to be solid.
I feel like that's the only place really for him to go is onto that third line, because one of the things where you take a guy who's a former first round pick like he is, and I know that he's had his issues, that's the reason that he's here, but he looked good in the training camp, as did Harkins in the preseason games. But I guess one of the reasons why is those guys were utilized as though they were a second line in those games, and you got to wonder this may be the tricky part about finding a Svechnikov that works in the NHL, and why the Detroit Red Wings had trouble finding that for him, is just the idea that when he's being used as a second liner, we saw him looking really good. I think people were really, really excited and talking about, hey, take a look at this guy. He's found money, which is exactly what he looked like. But he's been utilized in second line minutes. Once you're asking him to play fourth line minutes as a former skill guy who's a first round pick, all of a sudden you don't look the same. And so I kind of feel like if we're going to get the version of getting of Svechnikov that we felt like we were seeing in training camp, he needs to get third line minutes in order to get kind of rolling like that. I wonder if Jansen Harkins is the same thing. We saw a lot of good stuff out of Jansen Harkins. during the preseason. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that he was being utilized to a greater degree, and that players like that have a certain pacing. It's why, Ken, last season the Jets go out and they get the guys that they do with Trevor Lewis and Nate Thompson, because those guys play a certain style of game and they're used to being utilized in a certain manner. Every guy starts off skilled, but only a certain amount of guys can find that different kind of pacing. And that may be one of the things that I'm looking at this bottom 6 or bottom 4 and kind of has me wondering about how it's going to go for the Jets this year, is because I just don't know what the pacing looks like for all these guys. Christian Vesalainen as a fourth liner, Harkins, Svechnikov as fourth liners. I just wonder how they're going to make this work. And tonight was one of those nights that leaves me with more questions about how it's going to work than answers.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we need to figure, let's let it breathe a little while, see who's going to be on those lines, see what changes need to be made. I mean, we'll get into the defense in a hurry, but I mean, when you have the type of high-end players that the Jets have, with a lot of them having big contracts, the Jets brought in guys earning, considerable money in Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt. That means you don't have room for a $4 million fourth line player like a Matthew Perreault like they had in the past, right? So that means you need your young guys to emerge. Totally. You need Jansen Harkins to, would Jansen Harkins score more if he played with top 6 players? Of course he would, but there are only 6 spots available in that area. So then you need Jansen Harkins to find his pacing on the third or fourth line. And of course there are going to be guys where they have skill. If Svechnikov and Harkins are together, you have 2 skilled players on that line, right? So, and then you have a very dependable player in Riley Nash. I mean, no one's asking Riley Nash to go back and score 15 goals like he did with the Boston Bruins, but he can make some plays, and we'll see how it goes with those guys. But hey, for sure, Sean, I mean, they got to find their identity, right? We know the identity is shifting. There are guys that have more skill than a Brandon Tanev or maybe even a Mason Appleton, but they got to show it, and they got to find their role. They got to find out where they fit, and then they got to try to carve out more. I mean, that's the beauty of hockey. I mean, if you want more ice time, earn it. Just go out and play the best that you possibly can, and the opportunities are going to come, right? Everyone wants a productive player. Every single coach in the National Hockey League wants productive players. I think the Jets have a bunch of young guys that have the potential to be very good, but that it's finding your way where you're going to feel the most comfortable and go from there. I mean, that's what we're going to have to see. I mean, it's one game. We'll see how things go. We've watched pretty much every single day of training camp, right? So let's see how things go as the season wears on. That's the beauty of hockey, right? Things could look completely different in 2 or 3 weeks from now. There could be injuries. There could be call-ups. There could be guys who are underperforming. There will be guys that play, better than you had anticipated. So, let's see how the next few games go. And yeah, let's get to the D here. What do you think? Obviously, a great spot and great job by our cameraman Colin, who caught all that famous first scrimmage with Brendan Dillon. We certainly saw some of that on display. Jakob Silverberg certainly did not like his introduction to Brendan Dillon. Obviously, he was introduced a few times during those Pacific Division battles when Brendan was back with the San Jose Sharks. But what do you think of his debut? And also, what do you think of Nate Schmidt?
I'm going to get to that. I'm just going to say just a couple quick things here. One, you brought up Matthew Perreault. I think that's really important. I think he's going to be a guy that over the year we're going to talk quite a bit about this Jets team missing. Two, Justin Bunzelek, when he's asking how come so many of you are trashing PLD, but Laine was absolute garbage last year, worse than PLD. I don't think it matters that Laine was bad in Columbus. What matters is that PLD, as a Jet, has never performed like Patrick Laine did as a Winnipeg Jet. When you're trading, you're not trading to see which guy is worse with their new team. You're trading to try and improve your team, and I think it's fairly clear to most people that the team got more out of Patrick Laine as a Jet than they have so far out of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And then to get to what you're talking about, the defense, I mean, I thought we saw a little bit of a taste of what Brendan Dillon brings. It's going to be needed, Ken. I think it's going to be needed and important because I think Roscoe Picotrain has been beating this drum the entire time in this show that he feels like this team is not heavy enough. I've brought those concerns up I kind of think that's the case, especially the way that the third line is structured. The fourth line doesn't look like a team that's going to grind that much. And one of the things I would say about the game tonight is, yeah, it looked like the Winnipeg Jets were the better of the two teams for a good chunk of the game. But I did say at one point, like, this game looks like a real flyby. Like, this young Anaheim Ducks team, if you're a young player coming up into the NHL, how do you want to play? You want to play loose, free, and easy, right? You don't want to play with people like grinding the heck out of you. And so to me, it just started looking at some point that Anaheim started feeling really comfortable in that game, which allowed them to do what they did, because I don't think at any point Winnipeg made them look like they were in discomfort. So one of the few players who did that tonight was Brendan Dillon. Nate Schmidt, you saw signs. He didn't blow me away. I mean, I'm going to need to see more out of that. I don't know. You're giving the head.
Sorry, that was a comment. That wasn't at you. Sorry.
I think that, these players, I do think this, I'll say this, and I wonder what it says about training camp. But I don't think that those players looked like they were fully integrated with the Jets at this point. Sometimes players hit the ground running out of camp. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to truly see what those guys bring to the team. Decent starts by those players. I didn't think any of them had bad games. I didn't think any of them, blew me away. I just think it's going to take some time to kind of see how this team gels together. Maybe that was the thing that interested me most, is this Jets team that last year seemed to start pretty quickly with, the patchwork defense that they put together. Derek Forbort seemed to start out pretty good with this team. The Jets usually seem to get pretty good starts and kind of get to their identity fairly quickly. This Jets team tonight in game one, and I know it's game one, it's one game, but they looked pretty distant from having an identity that they can hang their hat on.
Yeah, for me, it's the opposite, Sean. I thought that they spent a lot less time in the defensive zone. I thought the defense core was a big part of that. The ability to get breakouts and cleaner exits. We'll say whatever we want. No, Anaheim's not a team like in 2015 that could run you out of the rink and make life difficult on the exits and breakouts. But, that part of the game looked a lot better for the Jets. They weren't hemmed into their zone. They didn't have any of those, 45 or 50-second shifts where they were, seemingly chasing the puck and, getting caught and giving up, shooting gallery of scoring chances from the high slot and the high danger zone. So for me, I would argue on the other side, I think that the two additions, I'm not saying that those are the best games those guys have ever played in the NHL either, but I think they made an immediate impact on the defense core. And were there some areas where the Jets had some challenges? Sure, but for the most part, I think that their exits were something where they really improved. And that's something that they will improve on as those players that we mentioned get more and more comfortable. I thought that Josh Morrissey had a very strong game. We've talked about it a lot. We expect him to be very good. Having a partner like Nate Schmidt is going to be a humongous benefit for Josh Morrissey and also for Nate Schmidt, who had a challenging year with the Vancouver Canucks. I think they're both going to be great for each other. One thing we heard them both talk about, Nate specifically in his last meeting with the media, if those guys, they weren't doing a lot of standing around. If they're doing a lot of standing around, it's not working for them. Both of them were very active. They got involved in the rush. That scoring chance that Josh Morrissey had on the 3-on-1 where Andrew Kopp had a perfect delay, found Morrissey in the high slot for the one-timer, and then Lowry got the rebound chance. That's a great example of activation. And when you have a partner like Schmidt, it's basically going to be something where it's going to be nonverbal communication. You're going to be able to look at your partner and know, I'm going to go this time and you hang back, or next time I'm going to go. It's one of those things. So, and the other part too, Pionk with Dillon, I think that's a major upgrade. You're right. Derek Forbort had a strong start to the first half of the year last year. Things kind of went a little bit sideways at times. Perhaps, maybe a little bit of overuse there because they didn't have, a lot of suitable options maybe on that third pairing. But Brendan Dillon is a guy who is really going to help the Jets, not just as a physical player. He's a guy that can get up in the rush as well. He's not necessarily an offensive guy, but he's a guy that can chip in a little bit as well. And it just sort of stretches the depth and it allows Dylan DeMello to be, a comforting safety blanket on that third pairing with Logan Stanley. So, I'm sorry, we're not going to firing coaches after one game. I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because
I'm sorry. I'm just not. This is not our. This is not where we're going. I'm sorry. We're not. It's a long season. If the Jets put themselves in a position where we need to talk about changes to the coaching staff, we will do so. But not after game one, where one team certainly held the flow of the play for the majority of the game. So.
Yeah. Hypothetically, if they went 0-44, I think he'd be in trouble for sure. So, yeah. Ken, people are touching on it. It's 2:00 in the morning back where you are. We're already over an hour. I think we should probably call this thing. Are there any last thoughts that you want to drop before we get out?
No, I think that we've covered it. We'll see how she goes throughout the course of this road trip. Obviously, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one because there's 2 days between games, and it's kind of an odd stretch to be, stops and starts right out of the gate. I mean, obviously, we know Mark Scheifele's going to be excited for a Saturday night hockey night game as he returns to the lineup. And hey, let's see what happens next, and we'll kind of go from there. I mean. Somebody's asking about Comrie. It'll be interesting to see when that first start comes. I think it could be on that next road trip. I don't necessarily see Eric Comrie starting a game before that next road trip. There are a couple back-to-backs in November that he's going to probably be getting into. But I see him probably more likely starting maybe either against in that week where they have Anaheim, LA, and San Jose. I'm guessing that he's going to get one of those games. But I think Hellebuyck's got at least the first 5 games out of the gate to see where things are at.
Thanks, Ken. Did a great job tonight.
You.
As usual, it's great to be back with you. I'm excited to be doing this and embarking on this season 2 of this. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in on the chat. It was great to see this many of you here at this time of night. I know it's tough. We appreciate your time and you staying up like this. If you appreciate us and you haven't done so already, please leave a like. And if you haven't subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for. Get to that as well. The more of you along, the merrier. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great season. Thank you for joining us on Game 1, and we will see you again on Saturday. Thanks, everyone.